Well, they said it's supposed to be about a 20 or 30 hour game. Could get that done in a couple days or try real hard. Alright, time to write the review. Oh, wait, oh no, oh man, I played the game so long, it turned into a skeleton. Alright, so we're finally getting a review of Elden Ring. It's been quite a journey to get through. Elden Ring is a great Souls game, but it's also a great open world game. People at first saying this game's gonna be a DS4, and after it came out, they're saying it was DS4, 5, and 6. But actually, I think this is more of a reboot, Souls trilogy. But it's like a good one where they refine everything and expand on the gameplay story. The combat is mostly the great, fast-paced, precise Souls combat we love. But there are a fair few new things. First off, there's like the riposte where you get a more powerful attack if you attack after blocking. It at first seems to be a bit too powerful, but when you realize like a lot of enemies can pretty well attack through that, you see it has its limits. The jumping attack is pretty interesting, but I think that I couldn't really retrain my brain that it was good now and not like the other ones. They also brought back power stancing movesets, called dual wielding in most games. They're really fun, but they do basically make two-handing one weapon irrelevant for most cases. The weapons arts are definitely the biggest change to combat in this game. They're more worth the mana now, and they do a lot of damage and look really cool. Some of them even give your weapon elemental damage on the base attacks without using it. This is, of course, in the community very well because, Dark Souls UI traditions. The weapon variety is really good, and a lot of it's because the game's really long. You get more chance to find and invest in different types of weapons and spells. The summons are also fun to have like a little different creatures fight for you. They fight for you in different ways. Some of them are more useful against different bosses. Some people think that they're too powerful, but I think for the amount of HP bosses have, the devs intend for you to use summons or some of the more powerful weapon arts or sort of both towards the end of the game. That being said, I didn't think that it was very justifiable to use them against regular enemies instead of bosses. But at the end of the day, play however you want. Well, it's good there's light stealth now, inspired by Sekiro. It's not as in-depth as Sekiro, but it's nice to have. Instead of awkwardly pushing the stick forward slowly to walk slowly. The vertical jumping's good. In Sekiro, you could vertically jump, but you were sort of jumping, grappling, hooking all over the place. This is the first time we're seeing like a more regular Souls game, more grounded one, you could say. The jumping makes platforming feel much better and less clunky. It's also really nice for those moments where you in the other Soul games you would get caught up on some geometry, but now you can jump over them. The horse is good. It's fast. and can turn sharply. Also, the double jump is nice. But there is a bit of a problem with its fall damage. It feels kind of glitched for the horse. The horse combat is alright. It's useful against certain bosses. It's kind of like the underwater combat in Sekiro, where it's boils down to strafe attacking them. The regular enemies are good as always, and have good variety for how long the game is. That being said, there are some areas where they sort of spam a bunch of them, put big group of them all together. The bosses are good, but I think that they're a little worse than previous Souls games. There are standouts, but most of them I don't feel are as iconic as the other ones. Part of this is probably because of how many there are. Now I know the dungeon and open world bosses aren't supposed to be as good as them. Like even like not counting them as real bosses, doesn't change the fact that they put time and distance between the main bosses. It makes the main bosses feel less prominent. That being said, as well as within the main dungeon and open world bosses, they're kind of repetitive. There's like a lot of the bit fat tree guys, a lot of the cat statues, a lot of the snaky tree guys, a lot of crucible knights. They come up a lot, and that can be kind of annoying, even if you're not 100% in the game. Now I know they couldn't really design like 80 or so unique bosses, but I do feel like they could have, changed like the different components that they changed up sometime, like the fire and magic and ice dragons. But I feel like they could have made that like they could have done a little more like that. Like maybe like one dragon's got a sword or something. All those like new animations and stuff. I feel like they could have done more. The exploration is very good. It's the best I've seen since Skyrim, keeping in mind that I haven't played Witcher 3 or Breath of the Wild. There's a great spider web of eye-drawing points across the landscape, and the main dungeons act as these huge focal points for most of the areas, and there's one focal point that you can see for most of the game. You really get the feel of journeying, also like in Skyrim. Part of the journey is like climbing Mount Gamir, and it really brought me to going to the further world in Skyrim. The scale helps the world building. The multiple cities in the other Souls games felt more like they were one big city, where here it actually feels like multiple cities in different kingdoms. The pictorial map is also really good, and having a lot of its own focal points and getting you to want to find more map pieces. The main/legacy dungeons are really good, and they feel like a regular Souls level placed inside the open world, but they are a bit more open and and they do a good job of having like these intentional optional paths feel like secret paths, sort of like Dishonored in the other Arcane games. One of the best examples of this is early on the rooftops of Castle Stormvale. There's also the minor main/legacy dungeons. They're about half as big and can feel a bit. But the problem with them is they can feel a bit too wide, a little empty. They're not quite as good, but they're also fun. There's also the mini dungeons, which are a few types of small areas. They're generally fun, but per the same type are a bit repetitive in gameplay and aesthetics. But they do change things enough to not be completely dull, especially for the aesthetics and the caves being more area specific. Also, the fact that there's so many different types of mini dungeons means that the mini dungeons get grading way slower. To go into the specific ones, the different types of mini dungeons, the tombs are good crypty, trap-filled places that have a bit of Sin's Fortress in them. The hero's tomb is kind of have a similar thing. They got these like big moving solid traps throughout the levels. The mines and caves are pretty straightforward dungeons. They aren't particularly good or bad. The ruins and forts on the open world are also kind of similar, but are a bit more open and feel a little more empty and are shorter, and I didn't like them as much. There are these like little mini castles that I found are pretty fun. The castle just the castle feels just really good though in these games, and they give you a small taste of that. Difficulty in this Souls game is way different than the other ones because of the open world. You may go into an area way over or under leveled, but for me, I feel that it balances out for most of the game. It's really nice that when you run into a difficult box, the only solutions aren't grind for levels or get good. Instead, you can go and explore and get levels naturally and come back when you're ready to defeat it. That being said, the game's exploration funnels down around each 1/3 of the game. Not only is the exploration less fun, but there's an awkward difficulty spiking because of it. The game gets a little less good, but it's never outright bad, even in the emptiest, blandest area, the mountaintop of the giants. Also, there's a lot of late game bosses that feel a bit artificially difficult because they want to make sure it's still hard even if you're a completionist and your soul level's 1,000,000. They just don't stop attacking you. The worst bit of this is the Elden Beast and its tracking disco ball of doom, where you almost certainly have to tank a full health bar worth of hits. The story is much clearer and less hidden than the other Souls games in the series, but it's not quite as straightforward as Sekiro. If you get about 50% of the story out of Sekiro without digging, and you get about 10% out of DS1 without digging, I'd say you get about 30% out of this one without digging. It's a fairly interesting story and characters with decent lore. The voice performances seem a bit better this time, I think, than the previous ones. There's a lot of passion in it. It's real good. There's a lot of good areas with great visual aesthetics, especially the main dungeons, and especially Lucaria Academy and the Volcano Manor. But collectively, the visuals seem a bit lesser compared to the other Souls games because of all the bits between the main dungeons. It's not all bad. There's a lot, but there's a lot of fields and such. Not that there's much they could do about that. It just doesn't feel as much handcrafted entire all the way through as the other ones. But that's more so collectively. If we were just taking the more handcrafted parts, it'd be on par. The music's pretty good, especially the title card thing. There's a lot of good mood-setting songs. But unfortunately, I don't think the boss music's as good. There's still some pretty good ones. But not near as many ones that I'll remember forever. But the not as good ones are still decent. But that being said, there's a lot of good area music. That's really good. It really sets the tone. Those are some of the better songs in this game. Especially like the Lucaria song and the Caelid song's pretty good, and the Towers song is pretty good. One thing is that this game is really long. I've wrote about 8 pages for this review. It's quite the journey, and it's easily over 100 hours, even without being a completionist. But it's quite a toll, so be prepared. Overall, this is a great, incredible open world experience with exciting Souls gameplay. I'm giving it a 9.52. That's it. If you have anything to say about this, comment below, and I would like to comment back. Probably be my regular playlist of all my videos, so check those out. Thank you to anyone that likes, comments, and subscribes. That's it.